On 5 News tonight, a special programme on the Orlando attacks, America's worst mass shooting in recent memory.
Oh my God, they're all shooting back.
Investigators have described how Omar Mateen staged his attack and how they stopped him. Tributes have been paid to the 49 people who died.
Our hearts go out to the families of those who've been killed. Our prayers go to those who've been wounded. This is a devastating attack on all Americans.
Could more have been done to prevent the attack? It's emerged the FBI had interviewed the killer 3 times on terror-related matters in the past. And Donald Trump is criticised for trying to make political capital out of the tragedy. But could the attack see him gain more support? Welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Danny Sinha. It was the worst mass shooting in America for a quarter of a century. 49 people killed in an attack on a gay club in Orlando. The gunman was Omar Mateen. Well, throughout the day, details have been emerging of the police operation that tried to stop him killing more people and of those who lost their lives. A friend of one of the victims told 5 News she believes he died a hero. Julian Drucker reports from Orlando.
They'd waited desperately for news, but for many relatives, it only confirmed the worst. Police in Orlando have now officially identified many of the 49 victims. Among them, 23-year-old pharmacy technician Stanley Almodovar, who'd posted a video of himself dancing in the club just moments before he was killed. 37-year-old Kimberly Morris worked in the club as a bouncer. The youngest victim was 20-year-old dancer Louis Omar Ocasio Capo. Friends of 34-year-old Edward Sotomayor say he died whilst trying to protect his partner.
He didn't prioritise himself over anybody. He tried to get his partner out. It's tragic and it's very sad, but we know that he sort of, I guess, died a hero.
The attack also left 53 people injured.
Our hearts go out to the families of those who've been killed. Our prayers go to those who've been wounded. This is a devastating attack on all Americans.
Look at that, just shooting back and forth.
More than 300 people were inside the Pulse nightclub when the gunman opened fire just after 2 o'clock on Sunday morning. You don't need to see to comprehend the level of violence. Shortly afterwards, the popular gay club posted a message on social media telling everyone to get out and keep running. Those who couldn't run had to be carried out. There was a standoff for 3 hours before armed police were able to get inside.
You're sitting there having a great time at a club, and then you hear what sounds like fireworks or balloons popping, and you assume it's part of the show. And then when you hear people start screaming and the sound doesn't stop and people start falling, you realize it's not a show anymore. And at that point, I realized I needed to get out.
Police used an armoured vehicle to blast their way into the nightclub, allowing many of the clubbers to escape.
We were able to rescue dozens and dozens of people that came out of that hole. The suspect came out of that hole himself, armed with a handgun and a long gun, engaged in a gun battle with officers where he was ultimately killed.
The gunman was 29-year-old Omar Mateen, who was shot dead by police after exchanging fire with more than 10 officers. President Obama has called the nightclub shooting an act of terror and of hate. They were simply enjoying a night out, but they are now the victims of the worst mass shooting in US history. And the people of Orlando are struggling to understand why and how this could have happened. Julian Drucker, 5 News, Orlando.
Well, President Barack Obama says it's likely this was a case of homegrown extremism. Omar Mateen was known to the American authorities. The FBI interviewed him twice before closing their investigations. Well, so-called Islamic State has called him one of its soldiers. But Mateen's father said his motives had nothing to do with religion. And his ex-wife said he was disturbed and violent. Simon Vigar has the details.
Omar Mateen's attack on the gay nightclub was a hate crime, and in his call to police, he claimed allegiance to so-called Islamic State. His friends and neighbours are in shock.
He was a normal teenage person, lived a normal life. Never crazy, never.
Mind-blowing that someone lives a few doors down from you can be so hateful and awful. It's scary.
Mateen was a US citizen of Afghan descent. His ex-wife says this is not about jihad, it's about mental illness.
In the beginning, he was a normal being that cared about family, loved to joke, loved to have fun. But then a few months after we were married, I saw his instability, and I saw that he was bipolar and he would get mad out of nowhere. That's when I started worrying about my safety, and then after a few months, he started abusing me physically.
Mateen had been an armed security guard with G4S since 2007. In 2013, work colleagues reported inflammatory comments he'd made about so-called Islamic State. The FBI twice interviewed him. In 2014, Mateen was questioned a third time over suspicions he was linked to an American IS suicide bomber. The FBI concluded there was no substantial relationship, and Mateen was not put on a watch list. It meant he legally held a state firearms license in Florida. Mateen's father admits his son was homophobic.
I condemn what he did. I wish I did know that what he was doing, if I did catch him, I would have arrested it myself.
Tonight, the head of the FBI said their earlier inquiries had thrown up no hard evidence.
We're also going to look hard at our own work to see whether there is something we should have done differently. So far, the honest answer is, I don't think so. I don't see anything in reviewing our work that our agents should have done differently, but we'll look at it in an open and honest way and be transparent about it.
The debate on gun laws is back in the headlines. The chances of any action are as distant as ever. Simon Vigar, 5 News.
Well, live to Orlando now, and Julian Druker is there for us. And Julian, this is clearly a city stunned by this latest attack.
Danny, it is really hard to compute the carnage which happened here over the weekend. You can see this area is still at a state of being shut down at the moment. Now, President Obama said in the last few hours that the homophobic nature of this attack is important in understanding the motivation of the person who did this. And tonight we're joined by Heather Wilkie, who's director of the Zebra Coalition, which offers help to young gay people in Orlando. Heather, first of all, this location, this club, was a key haunt, wasn't it, for the people in your group?
Absolutely. What we have to remember here is that it's not just a nightclub. This location is somewhere that's important for our youth. It's a way that they can connect with like-minded people. It's a community support system. And so, you know, this is devastating to our youth. We support youth ages 13 to 24, and our age range was directly impacted by this tragedy. It's a horrific event. We have seen an outpour of support from the community, but we are devastated.
And you've been hearing sort of stories of what happened on that night from people you regularly speak to as well, yeah?
Absolutely. The stories are just unfolding, you know, and you can see on social media the outpour of stories that people have started to share of the ways in which they've been connected to the youth. We know that our youth have been directly impacted. Someone in this community will know someone who knows someone. I mean, it's a small community. We have a large LGBT population, a large Latino, Hispanic population, and so we have been very hurt by this issue.
We have had terrorist outrages across the world, in America, of course, over the years, but nothing as specific as this before on a certain community. I mean, that's what makes this even more of, doesn't it?
You never want your city to be the city that's known for something as tragic as this. You never want to see families that are hurt. You never want to have mothers who are losing their children. And now, unfortunately, this is what's happened in our city.
I just mean the homophobic nature of it. We haven't specifically seen that on recent attacks, have we?
We have not seen that, and it definitely hits our community in a very different way. We have a lot of people who identify as LGBT, and so luckily there are a lot of organizations here that focus on this community, but we know just at Zebra Coalition our numbers are huge. It's hard to see that this, could have been an incident that was targeted for, the LGBT community.
Heather, thank you so much for that on this difficult day. 49 victims, and there will be vigils happening tonight across the city for all of them.
Julian, thank you. The gunman's father said he thought religion has nothing to do with the attacks, despite Omar Mateen calling police during the attack to pledge allegiance to so-called Islamic State. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Nihad Awad, the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, who's based in Washington. And I started off by asking him if he was worried about an anti-Muslim backlash.
Well, I'm sure Muslim Americans are extremely concerned about what happened. This was a major crime against innocent people, and it happened in a calm and beautiful city. And definitely American Muslims, on top of that, are very concerned about their safety and their security, because there have been some threats of backlash by individuals here and there. And it happens, unfortunately, after every major attack that happens, whether in the U.S. or abroad. And if the perpetrator claims to be Muslim or happen to be Muslim, then it becomes like automatic, blame game and scapegoating of American Muslims. But also, let me say that the overwhelming majority of people in our society are loving. Most of the politicians and media commentators have been measured and have been responsible, because they have seen the quick and swift response from CAIR, from the American Muslim community, condemning this attack unequivocally, swiftly, without doubt.
Someone keen, though, of course, to use this to their political gain and use these murders is Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Of course, he has said that he was right all along, of course, calling for this ban on Muslims entering the United States. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yesterday, in our press conference, I cautioned politicians against misusing and exploiting this tragedy, and I asked them to respect the victims and the feelings of their families. And I reminded all of us that this is a time of unity. This is not the time to play political games. It is not the time to score political points and to play with people's emotions and fear. Donald Trump has proven yet again that he is an unstable individual. He shoots from the lip. He does not wait until he gets the facts. He has preconceived ideas and positions, and he's just waiting for incidents like this to show how unbalanced he is and how dangerous he will be if the United States elects him as a president. I have hope that the collective wisdom of our society, they will see through that politicians like this are not worthy of the highest office in the land.
Nihad Awad, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up on 5 News tonight, how do America's security services respond to the threat of so-called lone wolf attacks? And remembering the victims, how the world is showing its solidarity with the victims of the Florida shootings. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News tonight. Donald Trump is being accused of using the attacks to gain political support for his controversial policy of banning non-American Muslims from entering the country. Well, the Democrats have attacked the plans and also the fact the Republican nominee is using a time of national tragedy for political gain. Well, Gary Tischler is a political writer for the Georgetown newspaper in Washington, and joining me in the studio is Charlie Wolf, who's a Republican commentator. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Gary, I'm going to start off with you. When there are major tragedies, of course, lots of politicians do want to have their say. Just run us through what people are saying at the moment.
Well, I think it's a number of things. You know, we have Donald Trump, we have Hillary Clinton, we have President Obama. I would guess if you had to pick a person who should be speaking for the nation at about this time, I would have picked Mr. Obama's comments because they were presidential, they had empathy, they had feelings for the victims, and they identified what it was. It was terror and it was hate. And he was exactly right, and he was very moving and looked and acted like a leader. He was not talking about politics at all. Mr. Trump, I would guess, once again, first of all, talked about the political effect, and I think short-term this may help him. Long-term, I don't think it will. And
Charlie,
Hillary
I'd like to interject there because I know you are a big Trump supporter. I mean, do you think this is going to help him in the long run?
Well, it's not so much being a Trump supporter. It's the fact that he's relating to the people. Now, Mr. Obama, I agree with Gary, should be the one as the president speaking to the nation. But if you look at the last two times, San Bernardino and this, when you got a lecture on gun control, when this had nothing to do with gun control, this was a terrorist attack. And this is actually the first time, at least he said the word terrorist. I'll give him that. But he refuses to name it for what it is. And I think where Donald Trump is relating to the people is finally someone is calling it for what it is. And that is going to attract people.
You say it's related to the people, but there has been a lot of criticism of some of the comments he's made. I mean, do you sincerely think this is going to boost his chances of getting to
I'm not sure if it's going to boost his chances or not. It's a hard game to figure because he's a new kind of politician. But again, he does seem to be relating to the people. This is what got him the nomination in the first place. He was able to, he speaks his mind. And yes, puts his foot in his mouth many times, but it seems the public at least appreciate it's someone who wants to do something. They don't get that from Mr. Obama.
Gary, you mentioned Obama, and of course he has tried his best to change those gun laws and make it really a part of his legacy off the back of what happened with the Sandy Hook school shootings back in 2012. But again, he's failed, and he has blamed this recent attack on weak gun laws.
Well, I think that has something to do with it, but I also think I talk to people I know. I live in Adams Morgan, which is a fairly progressive community, a liberal community, but even anybody will say, yeah, let's get rid of the big guns and things like that. It should be logical, but it isn't, and it hasn't happened, and I'm not so sure that it will happen. But I think at some point, that's got to be considered part of the equation. It really does. I mean,
and of course, Hillary Clinton also feels the same. Hillary Clinton, sorry to interject, Hillary Clinton also feeling the same because she's calling for greater gun control, isn't she?
But it doesn't work. This is the problem. We've already got laws on the books, and that's not working. For instance, the FBI knew about this guy. Why weren't they tailing him? Why didn't they cut him off before he could do something like this? The different things that Mr. Obama called for after Sandy Hook wouldn't have prevented probably any of the tragedies we've had since then. So it's just putting laws on the books that will affect the common average responsible owner. And that's why I think the Congress and a lot of citizenry are worried. This is, the Second Amendment we're talking about.
It is a fine line, though, to tread, isn't it? Especially when you have big tragedies like this. Sorry, Gary, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I always hear this, too. Responsible owners don't shoot people. Of course they don't. But the ones that do shoot people have the same guns. And they're not very responsible. They're trying to do maximum damage every time out, whether it's this particular shooter picking a particular target or all the other ones we've had. They're the irresponsible shooters, and we have to figure out a way to get guns out of their hands.
Well, this is more than just an irresponsible shooter. This is a guy who, was calling for jihad this is a guy who's a terrorist,
Do you think, though, when politicians get involved, there is a fine line to tread?
It's a hard one to answer. I mean, a fine line to tread as in what? In the
comments they make.
Well, again, they need to lead, and they need to do whatever they do that's going to get the people to follow. And it does seem to be working for Mr. Trump up to now.
Gary, do you think that there is a bit of political scoring points here?
Sure. I mean, I think anything that comes out of a politician's mouth is politics. Yes, every time. And I don't know how you score it. Our friend here was talking about the people are behind him. And well, it's the core group of people, yes, that won him the election, but that's the only group I've heard some so far, you know, that angry group of people. And maybe they have a lot of things to be angry about, and maybe his plain-spokenness, which is more sloganeering than anything to me. As a writer, it's iffy, but I'm not trying to be intellectual about this. Yes, it does have its appeal, and I think short-term he's going to get some advantage out of this. But I don't think so long-term, because sooner or later, you have to speak in
Remember, we are in the year of the outsider, and it's the same over here in Great Britain with Jeremy Corbyn. It's the same with on the Democratic side with what's his name, Sanders. You know, they look at Mr. Obama and they look at Hillary Clinton. They're insiders, and they look at even, you know, over the EU debate over here. You see that the elites are kind of pushing one thing, and the average guy on the street says, "I just want to live my life, and I don't want to be hassled by my government, and this is what I'm getting."
We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks. Interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Charlie and Gary. Thank you very much. Well, if the aim was to divide, then the results in so many cities around the world has been the opposite: unity. Outrage over the murders of 49 people in a gay club has turned into solidarity for the victims. Landmarks lit by the colours of the rainbow, vigils marked by candles and songs, including one tonight in the centre of London. Minnie Stevenson has more details.
In the city where 49 people lost their lives, Orlando landmarks lit up in their memory. As hundreds gathered outside the White House for this vigil, the world grieved with them. Silence as a mark of respect from South Korea to Sydney, where the Harbour Bridge lit up in the colours of the rainbow, a tribute to the LGBT community targeted that night by terrorists. And in London, where Mayor Sadiq Khan stood shoulder to shoulder with gay pride organisers.
This really is an attack not simply on the LGBT community, this is an attack on our freedoms and values, and we've got to stand shoulder to shoulder with not just the victims of these attacks, but all of us who feel vulnerable now.
The attacks in Orlando resonate particularly strongly here. Fresh flowers and flags left at the scene of the 1999 nail bomb attack. Gay rights campaigner Owen Jones told me, like here 17 years ago, the terrorists will not win.
They will lose, they're on the wrong side of history, and the violence and the hatred that they show is only matched by the love that LGBT people have for each other in communities like this.
Here in the streets of London's Soho, thousands are expected tonight for a vigil in the capital. People here told me they will stand in solidarity with Orlando.
We have a vigil. Everybody's going to be standing here shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, showing support for Orlando.
If it had happened to in a straight community, I'd have been just the same, but you know, just for the fact that they've targeted a minority group, I think it's disgusting.
An attack which robbed 49 people of their lives in America is being felt the world over. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Well, that is all from us this evening. Sean Welby has the weather next, and I'm back with updates throughout the evening. Just to say, we're going to leave you with some images of the past 48 hours and the music of the Orlando Gay Chorus's tribute to the victims of that Pulse nightclub tragedy. From all of us, good night.